Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Sylvain Perrier, Group Leader at the Virtus Group. And this is webinar number 2 for us, which is fantastic and a little bit nerve-wracking at the same time. We're just getting our legs underneath ourselves. And today's session is called the AI Operating Plan, the calendar, the bets, and the metrics that turn AI from a topic really into an operating cadence. Now, there's a very specific reason we decided to choose this topic for today's webinar. Is the harsh reality is most software leaders, thank God, now understand that AI fundamentally matters to the success of their business. They've read the books, they've read the strategy posts, they've attended presentations, and they've likely hosted an AI DLC exercise. And more importantly, they've heard from their peers, their board of directors, their bosses, and they started asking themselves like a very practical question. Like, I can tell you that when these events end on a Friday, most of the team ends up at a bar or at the hotel, right, having a drink and so on. And then you'll see the CEO go quiet, retreat in the corner, and you go, "Hey, dude, what's wrong?" And he's like, "What do I do on Monday?" Right? They're not so sure what's going on here. So they start thinking, what's going to happen next week? What's going to happen in 8 weeks? What do I need to deliver? And is my company ahead? Is it behind? Do I have the right people? And how does this AI activity actually going to lead to something that's meaningful, that's going to be transform the business to something that they hopefully thought of? So that's what we're going to focus on today. Now, this session is not going to be about broad AI strategy discussion. It's really going to be about how vertical market software leaders can turn the AI, and I'm not talking about building features using AI, I'm talking about the underpinning of an organization into a practical operating cadence, choosing the right bets, putting the right meetings in the calendar, tracking useful metrics, and guess what? Managing the risks that go along with this, right? It's change. We should be used to that at this point. So today I am joined by some luminaries in the space. If you don't follow them on LinkedIn, I suggest you, after this webinar, not during the webinar, go to LinkedIn to follow them. They're publishing some great stuff. Certainly, they have, I'm listening to what they're saying, and it's very practical advice. So first up is JL. He's new to the family here at Virtus. JL, you've been here how long now? 2 weeks, 3 weeks?
A month now.
A month. A month.
Hey.
That is fantastic. So JL is our AI transformation lead. He's focused on helping teams apply AI in a practical and really focused way that's going to create lasting impact. Maria is part of Jonas Software, and she's the director of AI strategy and execution. She's very much focused on turning AI priorities into structured execution, measurable outcomes, and deep organizational follow through, right? That last part is super critical, that follow through and making sure they create something that's lasting. Thank you for joining me today on the webinar. Great to have you. So we're going to spend 30 minutes having a conversation, and I'm going to leave about 15 minutes at the end for the audience to ask questions. For those of you that are on, you just have to go ahead and click the chat button and we will answer your questions. So let's get started. So, JL, this first question is for you. So when you work with software businesses that are ready to make that dive, they're serious about AI, what's usually missing? Is it strategy, tooling, ownership, or is it something else?
That's a great question, and it's one that, to be honest with you, I get asked a lot. And given my background, in data science and in IT, most people would actually expect me to say it's all about tooling, and I'm actually going to say the opposite to that. Is that you would expect me to say tooling, but you're going to be wrong. And to be honest with you, most other people are as well, because I'm actually going to say, as a transformation lead, that I'm going to say that you don't start with AI. And I know that may sound a little bit contrary to what we're talking about right now, but the reality is that everyone has a strategy. Everyone talks about a strategy, but very rarely does it actually turn into action. The analogy that I often use is that everybody now has the instruments. Right? Everyone can buy the instruments. Everyone is investing in AI, but just because you have the instruments doesn't mean you know how to play in an orchestra. The real gap that we have to start focusing on is orchestration. And when we take a step back of what's really missing is that most leaders take AI and they try to bolt it on a process that they don't truly understand or one that's never really been mapped as well. So the missing piece really isn't, in my mind, strategy or tooling. It's an honest map of the as is of where we are right now and how the work actually flows today. So, the one thing I want people to think about is that orchestra analogy is that you can have the instruments, but just because you have the instruments doesn't mean that you know how to play in an orchestra just yet.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I see it more often than not, specifically if you're using AI to generate code or delegating, to AI writing code, and you start to realize you're just accelerating the issues if you don't have a proper structure today and how you execute against the whole idea of writing code. And it gets worse when the team is larger.
Absolutely. You can write really bad code much faster.
Yep.
Well, there's such a thing as failing fast, I guess, at this point. So, Maria, the next question is for you. So, a lot of leaders wake up one morning and they'll say, AI, it is a priority, but it doesn't really show up sometimes in how the business is managed. So, what really fundamentally changes when AI becomes part of the operating cadence instead of, dare I say, a side project?
I love that question, Sylvain. You are starting with very deep questions. Love that. I would say that a few things change, sometimes at once, but they reinforce each other. The first ones, which may not seem so obvious for everyone, is the accountability piece. Because if you have just a side project, that project will live in a specific team that's piloting or testing a tool or an initiative, but no one owns the result. However, when it becomes part of that cadence that you're mentioning, it should show up in your weekly reviews, in your KPIs, in your hiring decisions. And that's when the leaders will stop asking, like, are we doing AI? But they will start changing the conversation about what AI is producing this week or what are we achieving with this. And that's a completely different conversation. The second thing that changes, and it may be not super obvious at first, is the culture, because people will stop waiting for permission to experiment, because if there is a cadence, there is an expectation that people should be improving or making their processes more efficient. And then you move from AI being something that you talk about in the room to something that is actually in the room when you make the decisions. And one more thing that actually Jael just made me remember from our last conversation is that there's one thing that also changed a lot, and it's the way you're thinking about your department, about your company. And it's moving from tasks to entire workflows. Most companies start by using AI to help with an individual task, like writing an email faster, summarizing a file or a document, generating a report. And that is useful, but it's not where the real value is. When AI becomes part of your operating cadence, you start asking a different question, like, how does my work actually flow end to end, and where AI can reshape that flow? So instead of making one step faster, you redesign how the tasks are sequenced, who owns them, or how they are connected to each other. And that's when you start unlocking the real power of the technology and separating your company from other companies that are just experimenting.
Yeah, I appreciate you underscoring those three items, and I want to kind of color a little bit outside the lines here for the audience. I really get fearful when I hear the word we're using AI for a side project. Okay, so the stakes are a lot lower potentially. Mm-hmm. Let's assume that's the case. So the fear of failure dissipates. It's okay if we fail. That's fine. But the reality is these side projects, how do they get factored into growing revenue? Meeting your customer in the middle and offering them a better experience and something that lasts and is tangible for an organization. So real transformation and real change. And so this brings on kind of the next section here is going from AI strategy to operating cadence. And so Maria, this question's for you. So if the VMS CEO says, I have a dream, right? I'm not channeling MLK here. Just want to put that out there. They say, I believe AI matters. I don't know what to do next. So where should they start?
I'm going to echo again what JL mentioned. You need to start with the pain, the problem, and not the technology. I keep saying this to people I talk to. You need to identify what is your process and then trying to improve it even before using the technology. But if you're a leader, just sit down, identify what are those 2 or 3 biggest operational headaches that you have in your business. What are the things that are slowing down your teams every week? And then try to see if there's any way to improve it without using the technology. If you already try everything, maybe you already help departments connect better, maybe it's not a people problem, then that's when you start thinking about how AI can help. And at that point, you shouldn't be looking for the most exciting use case. You should be looking for one where the problem is clear and where you have data. You'd be surprised to hear that, or maybe not, a lot of people want to try and build an initiative or a use case, and they don't even have data. So data is super important. And when you identify those potential use cases, just pick one, and run it just like a real project with a deadline, a responsible, someone who can own that initiative, because that first win will do 2 things for your organization. First, it will create that confidence and the momentum inside the organization, but it will also give you a model that you can repeat for the next and the next use case. A lot of people try to launch many initiatives at once, and then they end up just with many slow initiatives instead of one clear result. So that's what I would say. Just start with the pain and not the technology.
That's great. Start with the pain. Let's underscore that, right? And if you could fix it, all the much better in this case here. JL, it's Friday, 3:00. I give you a call and I'm like, hey, I got an idea. I got a pain, as Maria pointed out. And I really believe in AI. Got a small team. And I say, listen, where do I start on Monday? So what would you say?
Yeah, it's a question I think a lot of people actually struggle with, because people try to go very big, very, very quickly. And we all know that boiling the ocean, a little bit of a long task, not going to happen over the weekend. But I think one of the big things that I always want to underscore is that you shouldn't be guessing at a lot of these things, right? I mean, if you start out with a good understanding of your business and the process flows, and again, I know lots of viewers on the podcast say, why does he keep talking about process? He's not a process guy. But I think it all really hinges on some of the business fundamentals of it, of understanding the process flow, then, really reading that map and looking for the really repetitive, rule-based, low judgment steps, because those are your biggest ROI targets that you're ultimately going to have. And they're going to show the most measurable value as well. Because one of the things that is often missed in AI, and one of the reasons why we have a little bit of lunchbox letdown at times, is that we have all of this promise, but we're not measuring things. And as a CEO, you want to see that, hey, after 90 days, what's the difference? Why did we do this? We're investing in all of these tokens. What's the benefit that we're actually getting out of it? So one of the best ways of actually showing it is having those repeatable, low judgment steps and starting to automate those, because that's what you want to really point AI at first. I'll always come back to it as well, that I think in a lot of these cases with the repeatable task, people default by adding more people to it. The best sign of a really bad process is just continuing to add more and more people to it and expecting that you're going to get a different or a better result in it. We've all seen that happen where suddenly organizations explode with hiring, and people again get curious, why aren't we seeing any results of additional hiring, or why aren't we seeing results of AI? We're really talking with AI a fundamental change of how we actually work. You can't just take AI, bolt it onto that old process or old way of doing it, and expecting a different result, because it's not going to happen. The analogy we always use is, rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. It's still going down. However, it may look better. It may have, it might be better looking in a PowerPoint deck, but you're not going to see the results. So really look for those pinch points, the pain points, and really start measuring the hell out of it. That's when you're really going to see the benefit. And it's also going to expose some of your organizational gaps as well. It's not just about moving people into different positions. It's about understanding the pinch points and being able to address it, and using AI to address a lot of those pinch points rather than just putting more people at it as well. Sorry, long answer to a short question, but
I
No,
love
so
it.
that's great. And I would also say for the marketers that are listening, at Lunchbox Letdown is probably the best handle you could register on X or on Instagram. Like, just think of the memes. But I think like what you're really fundamentally underscoring is, if you know the sequence of events, processes you're saying, and your inflection points, I call them gates, right? And gates are typically where you measure outcome into the next. AI fundamentally comes in and can collapse everything to create true savings. And
absolutely.
it reminds me of the 90s. Hey, like, we got a lot of projects, let's go higher, 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 higher. And then suddenly you realize, well, your quality's crap, your product roadmap can't sustain throughput and flow
Mhm.
and blah, 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 all those things. AI just makes it that much worse. So you're right in calling that out. Now let's kind of shift from choosing the right AI bets, and I want to continue with you, JL, on this next question. I'm a VMS business operator, and where would I see like the earliest opportunities? Is it in process aside? Is it in product? Is it in engineering? Is it in QA? Is it in support? Finance, maybe?
Yeah, another great question, Sylvain, and I'm glad you bring it up. Is that quite often, I think where we start is often overlooked. We try to find a quick spot to start. I think the reality is that from my experience, support is usually the usual first win that you're ultimately going to see. We're dealing with high volume transactions. We're dealing with internal facing processes, and it's relatively fast to measure. You can start seeing benefits from it as well. I think where the miss often is, and this happens a lot in businesses, is not really having those concrete targets, understanding where is it that we're starting with right now. And also, are we actually measuring it to see, are we making measurable improvements over time as well? And the one advice that the one piece of advice I always give to CEOs is making sure, and again, they've all heard it before, and everyone on the call has heard it before, if you don't measure it, you can't manage it. So setting those concrete goals, and making sure that that you're looking at activities that often you may pass every single day. That so often that they become invisible on you. You're not thinking about them, but that's typically where you're draining effort. And that's why you really want to bring those to the top. With looking at process mapping. And again, when I talk about process mapping, I'll take a step back to say why I used to be a hater of process mapping. That typically would involve 6-day sessions in a room with long pieces of paper with swim lanes and all sorts of things I never understood. The reality is that I want people to think about their process on a 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. Anybody that can really think about their business and can put it down on 8.5, 11 sheet of paper, that is the best starting point you're ever going to have. And the reality is, the output of that, or the benefit of that, isn't just the process, it's the conversation it's going to force. Because if you ask 5 people working in an organization to go into separate rooms and map out their process, I can guarantee you're going to get 5 dramatically different processes. Bring those people together to share it, you're going to have one hell of a conversation. And I can guarantee you changes will come out of that you've never really seen before. So I always say to CEOs, that's probably the best hour you're going to spend. Don't spend a 6-day offsite. Well, maybe spend 5 days having a party and 1 day doing this. But really focus in on that process and re-engineering it. as the next step coming out of that as well.
So Maria, next question's for you.
Yep.
What should business leaders think about business impact when evaluating AI opportunities?
Good question. And I think there are three different buckets on how they can think of the impact of the AI opportunities. I would say the first one is the internal productivity. So are we doing the same work faster? Are we able to scale our company with the same team? Anything that touches productivity could be like an indicator to evaluate that AI initiative. The second one is, of course, the revenue, which is also very important. And in this scenario, we start thinking about questions like, are we creating new value? Are we growing the retention or even winning more deals? And lastly, which sometimes is overlooked, is the risk aspect. Are we able to reduce error if we use this technology? Are we able to improve compliance or even catch problems earlier? Most AI opportunities will sit in one of these three buckets, and the job of our leaders is to make sure that there's a mix between them. Also depends on the strategy of the company, because if everything is in the productivity bucket, for example, you may be optimizing your company or like that engine, but you're not changing where the direction of your company is going. So then you would need to bring like a revenue kind of AI initiative. And if you forget all those three buckets, productivity, revenue, risk, just think of the use case and think, what is the cost of not doing it? And that question will usually reveal what is the urgency and importance of that specific opportunity.
That's great. So JL, I want to give you a scenario. So I did an AI DLC exercise. Mind you, I have a small team, let's say hypothetically 10 engineers, and that's a mix of product and QA. And so we have a bit of a SWAT team, and they are exclusively doing a pure, what I like to call a pure AI DLC process. And they've self-identified as being fairly mature in operating this at this point. You've done the process mapping for them. So we've had a, dare I say, come to Jesus moment where we're like, hey, we QA thinks we don't do anything well. Product thinks we don't build anything. And I think, well, I think everything's great. So we're 90 days in, we're putting out features. So now at this point, what should be reviewed? 90 days.
Yeah. Probably a very dangerous question to ask me, Sylvain, because I'm going to go on my soapbox for a moment.
Okay.
I would say the first 90 days for me is proof that it's becoming real.
Okay.
And every week after that is the number actually moving? Because, I think out of a lot of these sessions, great things are talked about, lots of changes potentially talked about how things are going to change. Then Monday morning comes about, and I think we're all natural that we all go back into the exact same ways that we did things previously. No change happens. And then when you ask people why that was, it's like, well, we're not all in the room together, or we're not, we are using it, or you hear all of these things as well. But I think one of the biggest things that I always look for is that, by, before the 90 days are actually over, I want to make sure that we actually have some proof that these things are actually happening. Do we actually see any change running in a new workflow, and not just in the sandbox? And then we as we move through the 90 days, are we actually seeing the numbers moving of any? Have we identified what the right numbers actually are? And then having those weekly reviews that are actually going to manage and review those metrics as we go through it. By the end of the 90 days, I can guarantee, and we can talk about this a little bit later about what is a sign of danger, is that by day 90, you should have a named owner of everything that you're actually doing. People should be using things in daily use and not say, well, we're going to deal with that in the next release or next week. And at least you've moved one workflow past the baseline of where it is. You're starting to see improvement as well. And I think one of the things that I always call on CEOs to do this is use that metric to manage the people and expect results. One term that, and again, you can use this one anytime you want, Sylvain. One thing that I think we're all guilty of is we love vanity metrics. Hey, we've all done AI DLC training, or we've done 6 trainings, or we went to 9 conferences, or we have 63 lines of code versus 61 lines of code. Those are fantastic things to measure. If you're all about vanity, the real result is, what are the metrics that you're trying to change, and have you changed them? Are you seeing, less headcount? Are you seeing increased productivity? And most importantly, are your customers happy? Are you delivering customer-facing products faster? That's the metric that I'm most interested in. I'm far less interested in how many days of training we've had. Those are enablers, but measuring enablers won't change your business. It'll make you feel good short term. Long term, what is the thing that we're all looking for? Customer success and customer happiness. And I'm sure there's far better terms for it, that metric, but everything we do really has to be about getting products into customers' hands faster. That's what AI is all about, and that's what we have to be using it to do.
And I would just add one quick thing, sorry. Delivering products faster to our customers, but products that matter to them, right? Because as you alluded earlier, Sylvain, now with AI, we can build faster, but are we building the right products or features for them? Yeah. And I was smiling because JL, that's exactly the same philosophy that I follow. So love it.
Yeah. There's a metric that you just can't avoid or cheat, and that's called time to value. Customers pay you to give them what they want. The longer you take, the faster you will erode their confidence and their belief that you can deliver to what they expect, right? You can't cheat that. Whether you're using a waterfall methodology, agile methodology, whatever's going to be here far down the road when I'm gone, you just can't escape this. And so customers know that a lot of firms today are using AI, delegating to it the generating code. And so you can't escape that. And Maria brings up a good point. I mean, so if we're able to deliver much faster to what generally what our customers want and what's in the art of the possible, we should all be shifting left, spending more time with our customers to help them meet their strategic needs, right? I mean, you just can't escape that, and I think that is something that a lot of businesses just don't get right for multiple reasons. And so, Maria, I want to go back to a question here for you is, and you spent a lot of time not only with Vertus businesses, Jonas in general, and others as well. What are some of the warning signs that you've seen anecdotally that AI initiatives are not becoming part of an organization?
Oh,
sorry, I had to throw that question out there.
No, it's a good question. I think you realize it's not part of the organization, or when it's not touching one of the strategies that you as a company have. And I think that goes even before AI. If you as a leader, you're not able to communicate what is the strategy or the vision of your company, then you're just going to start shooting for different projects, different initiatives without even thinking of where your company is trying to get to. So if you as a leader, if you are able to communicate the direction of your company, then it's going to be easier for me as an individual contributor or manager to choose where I should be focusing my time. So in addition to optimizing my internal productivity, I need to make sure that whatever I build is tied to the organization as a whole, and that I'm not just going in a separate direction. So if you're not able to connect a strategy with your initiative, then that's when it starts, like the gap starts becoming more visible.
I thank you for sharing that, because that's the proverbial why.
Yes.
So I remember when I used to code. Yes, I used to code a long time ago, but we're not talking about that.
I think dinosaurs were crawling through the earth, but I'm not sure.
100%. But it was more like, I can remember my CEO saying, "Hey, we're going to do this, this project, here's why we're taking the business this way. I'm like, so how do I fit into that grand vision? What's my contribution? What's the why? And how are we going to measure not just the success of what we're trying to do, but my own success? I think if you don't bring those pieces of the puzzle together, it becomes extremely difficult. JL, I want to talk about risk and governance. I am getting pummeled with questions from some of our large US and Canadian banks around AI safety, AI security, and so on for a lot of the technology that we have put out to market. I'm sure, and I hope I'm not the only one. I want to ask you, what are the non-negotiables around customer data, source code, proprietary information, and IP?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's one that we should really start by asking. And I always have a very simple mantra that I always tell everybody to use, and I think it's something that we can all take away from this as well. Know where your data goes before anyone types into any tool. If you start with that, that's probably one of the best spots that you can actually be, because what often happens is we all get, we jump on the bandwagon, we download a tool, hey, we should be using this tool or that tool. We don't necessarily know exactly where they came from, but it's really cool, and hey, it can create a video, or it can create a video game in 5 minutes. And meanwhile, we're plugging away, putting in our information, assuming that it's all completely safe. The reality is that I'd love to say that people in our position or smarter people aren't also on the bad side, but there's lots of them. And they're all looking for the most valuable thing in the world, which is our information, customer information, our code, all of those things as well. So really, making sure that you're only dealing with approved tools, right? Being able to evaluate tools, and I know everyone complains that, I can't use all the tools I want, but there is a process that tools have to be approved by. The ones where, you're sure that they're not using your data to train themselves on, or to divulge any of those, because, we want to keep our secret sauce to ourselves. We don't want to share that with absolutely everyone. And I've seen lots of examples, and there's been lots of examples, around data breaches that no one, woke up in the morning saying, I want to breach my data. It was typically that they took silly risks that they didn't truly understand. They didn't know what they didn't know. And that's probably the most dangerous thing that I see it all the time, is that make sure that, that you understand that risk isn't abstract. Risk is real. There's people constantly looking to take advantage of your data. And, think, and I wake up, with weird nightmares about an engineering pasting source code into a free chatbot they found last Tuesday. I'd love to say that that's a fantasy world or a dream world. It happens. And you know what? You can't put the genie back in the bottle. You can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. Once it's out there, you're not getting it back. And you can say, well, I didn't mean for that to happen. It does happen. So understand what the data, where that data is actually going, know where that tool came from, and don't just by default trust everything. Right? Take a very risk-averse view of AI tools, and realize that new AI tools are created all of the time. I know some of the same folks that I went to school with have sort of gone to the dark side. Very smart people, far smarter probably than myself or anyone on the call. They're doing very well because there are a lot of security risks out there, and people don't take them seriously enough. So don't think that you're having blockers put in front of you just because they don't want you to have the cool tools. Realize that it's to protect you and to protect the most important thing, which is our customer data as well as our source code as well. So again, sorry, Sylvain, long question, but one that I'm very passionate about as well.
If I may add, because as you said, JL, it's a fascinating topic. I think that some companies, instead of creating that governance that you're mentioning of defining what is the process of approval, they just go and shut down all the tools, right? So they don't even let people experiment or put a process in place. So the easier way is just, we are not going to use AI at all. And I think that's the other extreme. So I think it's very important what you highlighted about having a process in place where your security team is reviewing guidelines, where your legal team is reviewing terms and conditions. and a process where you as a user know who I can reach out to, what is the form I need to fill out so that my tool or my initiative is pre-approved. And yes, also having the guidelines of at what point can I use just any tool just to run a quick POC with no sensitive data and no customer data. That would be the other point to add.
Absolutely. And it's a great point, Marie. And the one addition that I would make to it is I'd love for everyone to understand the acceptable use policy as well,
Yeah.
and about what not to do. You know, I've seen acceptable use policies, and I'm not making this up, that have been 45 pages long. I can guarantee you no one's reading a 45-page document, even though you're getting them to press OK. Acceptable use policy should be one page, and everyone should have them pasted at their desk or on their desktop to truly understand them. If you're burying people in legalese, I know the default position, which is, I'll press OK and not really understand it. We need some basics, right? I had a boss, way back when the dinosaurs were again crawling the earth. And he used to say, you would know the person that knew the absolute least by the number of binders and laminated diagrams they have on their desk, because those are the things that they never read. Like the ones that put them in practice are the ones that are actually getting work done. There's a better word for it, but I'll say getting work done.
It's incredible today. What this underscores is that security, or just the knowledge of data at rest, data in flight, all those things are just not core to many organizations' DNA. And so this exposure when you're using AI tool sets, this just makes it worse. It can make it worse. You just don't know. I think I'll give you an example. Recently, I was asked to review a SOC 2 framework, a Type 2 framework. And, it's about 36 policies on average in a series of registers. Clearly, no one in the business knew anything about this. Worse than that, this AI was used through and through to generate the policies, and no time to onboard, no time to train on OWASP and all those great things. So be mindful of governance, the right mix of governance. Be mindful of risk. It's always better to err on the side of caution, I think would be the advice here. So we are 37 minutes. If the audience has a question, I suggest you go to the chat feature here on Riverside, who is not sponsoring this webinar, by the way. I just want to make that clear, but they should. Go ahead and ask your question, and I'll make sure to bring it up. But let me just ask a question. I have a series of questions here I drafted in advance, so let me just pick one. So
I'm frightful.
Yeah, so let me throw this one out. Let's start with Maria. So how do you handle a team that's excited about AI, but they're not disciplined on how to use it? And they're engineers. Use case, they're excited. They never used AI. They want to start. How do you walk them through it?
Okay, there are a few things. And I think you've mentioned a few, but I'm just going to try to recap. One is, if they are excited, the fact that they are excited and they have the tools doesn't mean that they know how to use it. So first of all, some training on how to use the tools. But even before you start doing that, you need to also set metrics. We talked about this earlier, like what doesn't get measured doesn't get fixed or improved. So we need to measure. And even before measuring, we need to define what is the goal. Like, why are we even enabling these teams to start using AI? So what is my end goal? How am I measuring? Giving some training. And then lastly, keeping teams accountable. If we are measuring, we need to keep teams accountable, maybe through a cadence. I don't know how often you want to track. It will go back to every business leader. Maybe it's bi-weekly, maybe it's weekly, but you need to start identifying, are the teams excited and actually using the tools, like the adoption part, or is it just an excitement in the first week and then it starts declining? So those 4 items would be the areas where I would focus.
Great. Awesome. So we have a question from the audience, from Dan. So the tome, and the fact that you use the word tome is fantastic, Dan. So let's call that out right away. The tome of governance is definitely a non-starter. So on the flip side, what's a good length for a governance structure, and what format? Could it be PowerPoint, Word, Doc, PDF, to actually increase actual engagement and understanding. JL, do you want to tackle that one?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say tome is a fantastic word. I've learned the meaning of that. I didn't study literature, but I've learned what tome actually is. And it typically is probably plus of 40, 50, 60 pages long in mice type. So you're probably not going to read it, and probably available in PDF and every other format you could ever imagine. My mind, when you boil it really down, it's got to fit on one page. I think that's people's capacity to understand, is being able to pin it on something or carry it with you. It needs to be one page, and it needs to be distilled into words that we can understand. I've seen lots of governance terms that I have to look up in a lexicon to try and understand what they actually mean. We'd always hear words like doubled indemnity. And as a programmer, I don't know what indemnity actually is, but, tell me about what I should be doing and what I shouldn't be doing as well. And, making sure that there are, escalation points where people can ask questions, because there are questions that are going to come up. And I love that people ask the questions. Because that means that they're actually starting to think about it as well. So don't think that you can have one document that's so long that nobody will ask questions. They'll just be afraid to ask questions. So have one page, but even more importantly, have an escalation path where people can ask their questions and actually get responses to in a timely manner as well. So aim for one page. And I know most people are going to say that, that's nearly impossible, but, one page, 12-point type. I think that's ideal.
I want to add something, and I want to reuse the example that you gave, JL, earlier about the process. If you're able to share your process, then it doesn't matter how long your governance files is. If you're able to communicate it, articulate it, and you actually understand it, that will be enough. And usually it should be like 2-3 sentences that comes out of your mouth. So yeah, it doesn't have to be that complicated.
Yeah. And where does this live? I have found, I've seen Confluence, I've seen SharePoint, I've seen internal wikis, but places where people congregate to get that source of truth is important. I will say, attestation models for security have not caught up in the world of AI. It's slowly percolating. No one will read 50 policies. No one will read 20 pages describing 50 policies. JL's right. So is Maria. Keeping it simple, easy to use, and accessible is really super critical. So I want to say thank you to JL and Maria. That was a very practical discussion. Appreciate you guys joining today. The biggest takeaway for me is that AI progress does not happen because a company has a strategy pitch, a list of tools that JL called out. And it actually happens when AI becomes part of the operating cadence and, dare I say, the everyday. That's super critical. That means clear ownership, a small number of focus bets. Start with something easy. Support, as JL called out. Weekly reviews, useful metrics. Stay away from the vanity metrics. We get it. You wrote 50,000 lines of code. Who cares? Right? Are you helping your customers? Are you meeting their needs? And best of all, are you making revenue? And you're making moves without creating unnecessary risks, right? Security's got to be part of the DNA. So does governance, that one pager. So for everyone that joined today, the challenge is not to leave with a perfect AI strategy. That's impossible, quite frankly. The challenge is to leave with the beginning of something simple that your team can get passionate and behind quickly to create consistency in what you're trying to achieve. They decide what gets reviewed on a weekly basis. And guess what? Your ideas will change. The process will change. It will morph as you mature through this. That's the secret of the journey, right? It's not, let me show you the yellow brick road and you're going to walk down it. You have to pave it yourself, but you got to start somewhere. So we appreciate your time and look forward to you joining us on our next webinar. Who knows when that's going to be? I'm sure we'll figure something out. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.